They'll say an emotion is a feeling, and a feeling is an emotion, and that's the end of the conversation. But you haven't really explained anything. You just renamed it. So that's why in the building blocks of emotional intelligence, we begin to understand. You get a new language. You begin to really understand what an emotion is. It's actually really simple. I have to back it up. You've heard me talk about this before, but you have 3 brains. I have 3 brains. You have a primitive brain. It's called the reptilian brain. It's the body brain. It is breathing you right now, beating your heart, digesting your meal, regulating your body temperature. It's your primitive, really primitive, reptilian brain. You also have your newest brain, which is called the neocortex, which is allowing you, these sounds coming off of your computer, make sense of them. It's your thinking brain. It allows you to think, to remember, to use language, to do math, to be creative. This is your plans. This is your thinking brain, newest brain. Okay. You also have an emotional brain. It's called the limbic system. It's primitive. And here's the punchline. The emotional brain produces emotion like the reptilian brain produces heartbeats. It's an impulse. Boom, boom, boom. You can't help it any more than you can help having a heartbeat. So I'm defining an emotion for you. An emotion is an impulse produced by a primitive brain of yours. Now, anger is what's called a secondary emotion. By the way, this impulse, this is an important part. The impulse is experienced as a pressure. So think of a recent time. Think of a time something happened to you. It was really good, it was really bad, it was really scary, it was really sad. And think of it. Now, if you got it, you will begin to feel some reaction in your body. You may. I don't know that. Not everybody is that sensitive yet. You will feel the memory of that feeling because the emotional brain has memory. You'll feel it as a pressure. Most people feel it somewhere in their chest area, around the center between your breasts or your solar plexus. Other people might feel it in their gut. So an emotion is an impulse experienced as a pressure produced by the emotional brain. Okay. The word feeling describes emotions. So feelings are descriptions of that impulse. The impulse could be pleasant, you could like it, or it could be unpleasant. It could be mild, moderate, or intense. Feelings describe that. I feel happy, I feel lonely, I feel wonderful, I feel great, I feel cut off, I feel really content. I have all these feelings. Feelings describe emotions, like adjectives describe nouns. It's a red table. That's what feelings are. So now we know that emotions are impulses. And here's this guy that's going postal because he's pissed. He could be pissed for a lot of reasons. A lot of people are pissed. But not everybody flips out. When you realize that the anger is an emotion and that he's discharging the emotion, now at least it gives you a way to understand how come the guy flipped his lid in the office or at the post office. Because the pressure was so great that he blew. In the same way that too much pressure in a pot or in a pipe will blow a hole in the pipe. I just had a pipe blow in my house the size of a pinhead with a joint connected, a copper. It was an old connection between a copper and a lead pipe. So it had worn out a hole in the pipe, and it just blew. It was really lucky. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I heard it, and I cut off the water. But that thing could have gone all day long. It could have gone all night. So pipes blow when they're rusted out and there's too much pressure, okay? people blow when they're rusted out. There's too much pressure. When there's too much emotional pressure, the slightest thing can cause you to have an attitude and blow. So part of the challenge, once you realize that emotion works this way, now you can do something about it because you can actually discharge the emotion. If you can lower the pressure, you're less likely to blow up at your kids at home just because you had a bad day at work. Could have been something happened at work, upset you, that pissed you off. Now, anger as a secondary emotion is another story. But let's just say you got pissed off at work. Your boss or a colleague said something or did something and you felt offended by it. But you didn't feel safe enough to express yourself at work. You don't want to do things at work that put yourself or your position in jeopardy, especially in a job world like we are living with in our society. And so you advisedly, with good judgment, you kept your mouth shut. Now, you come home, and somebody didn't finish their milk, or they don't want to brush their teeth, or the TV is on too loud, and you flip out. You get really pissed. What's your problem? An opportunity to take it on as a challenge. Because you are in charge. Let's put it this way. You can be in charge of how you express yourself. Regardless of you're in charge or not, you are responsible for how you express yourself. Unless somebody declares you insane. If you're declared insane, then they look you up in a real loony bin because you're not responsible for your behavior. But unless you're categorized as insane, you are responsible for your behavior. The problem is you're not necessarily in charge of your behavior because much of the impulsive action, especially with anger, is coming from a primitive brain. So in that moment when your anger is taking over, it's like invasion of the body snatchers. You have just been taken over by the body snatchers in the form of your anger. Now, do you know that you can take over? That's the question. Is there somebody home who has the ability to take over? And do you care enough? I had a conversation with a woman today. She's a principal in the school. And she said, I really got to learn this anger stuff. I really got to learn this anger stuff with my kids. It's not enough that we're doing it in our whole school. I mentioned it before. So I said, okay, what's the smallest step? This is what I'm going to do with you later on today. What's the smallest step you could take? I could listen to that breathing exercise you teach. I said, okay, how much time do you want to give it? She said, okay, how about if I did it 10 minutes 3 times a week? In charge of the 3 schools, but she's not in charge of how she expresses herself with her little kids. Isn't that amazing? That we don't know that we can be in charge? I'm going to shift a little bit to story time. And I want to tell a story that I've actually told before because it's directly related to this idea of being in charge. It's the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So I think most of us have heard this story before. So you have this old king, and he's told that he's going to get ill and die, and his little son would be threatened to die, because all the people that want to be king, his newborn son, all the people that would want to be king would have to get rid of this little kid. So he gave the boy, again, who was born in secret, to the magician, Merlin the magician, who had him placed in the home of a duke who could be trusted. And sure enough, within a short period of time, the benevolent king had died. And the kingdom and so this duke was battling that duke, who was battling the other duke. They were all warlords, just like what's going on in Afghanistan or Iraq. Everybody was fighting for power. Now, what the king said, with the help of the magician, he said, I'm putting a sword in this stone, and the one who can pull the sword from the stone will be the one who is the rightful king of our country. And so while all these guys were fighting and battling and killing and maiming to get power, no one could pull the damn sword out of the stone, and they tried. In the meantime, Arthur was raised as the younger brother of another knight, and Arthur was getting to be a young man now. He's like 18 or 19 years old, and his brother wanted to go over to the stone and check it out. He was a knight. And Arthur said, because Arthur didn't know that, there and puts his hands on the sword and tries to pull the sword out of the stone. Damn it, I can't get the damn thing out of the stone. That was that. Couldn't do it. So what happened was that during the middle of the night, Arthur was walking around and he said, you know what, I'm going to give that damn thing a try. So Arthur gets up on the stone and pulls the sword out like it was a warm knife coming out of butter. And he realizes in that moment that this was his destiny. He put the sword back in the stone, checked that out a second time, maybe a third time, and said, yo, holy shit, is this for real? I guess it is. So he put the sword back in the stone. Next day, they called all the knights together, and Arthur pulls the sword out of the stone, now a young man, and he is the acknowledged king of England. And as the story goes, there was 100 years Camelot, a rich, wonderful, developing culture. 100 years, because the king, the rightful king, was on the throne. That's the King Arthur and the knights, and the sword and the stone story. Now, why did I want to tell it, you might ask? Before I got into that, I talked about who's in charge. Who is the king or queen in your kingdom? Now, I believe that the king or the queen is one way of describing there's a certain kind of knowing that we all have. There is a way of knowing, a voice. It's a knowing that tells us what's right and what's not right.